Hey, Kane, good morning. How are you today?
Good, thanks, mate. How are you?
Well, I'm doing fantastically. It's a beautiful Tuesday here in Washington. Before we get into introductions, I just want to thank the people for tuning in right now. I'm actually really excited to be doing this video today with Kane. We're actually going to be talking about quite a few things related to calculation groups. It's something I know I've certainly had some requests from a lot of people in the comments, and I've dabbled in them, but like a lot of people, mostly use them for, time intelligence, maybe some formatting and stuff. And I ended up coming across Kane's blog, and he's done some really cool stuff with calculation groups. And Kane, even like to speak to to your reputation as well. The fact that when I was talking to Marco a couple weeks ago, I asked him like, "Have you heard of?" He's like, "Oh yeah, that's one of the few blogs that I actually follow as well, related to DAX." So even Marco is like, "Yeah, I definitely follow Kane. He does some cool stuff in calculation groups." So I'm very excited to have you on and talk about those. And I think it's I'm probably going to be learning some stuff as well. So if you want to maybe give a bit of background about yourself, and then we can just go into kind of talking about some of the features and everything.
Yeah, sure. I guess I've been working in the Australian craft beer industry for quite some time, and before I made the jump into full-time BI stuff, I was a national sales manager. So I think, and most recently, I've joined the team at Agile Analytics up in Sydney.
Okay.
But yeah, I think I got a very user-driven kind of approach. I started building tools for salespeople, so for me, it was all about reporting.
Yep.
And you'll see with the demos, the DAX isn't super complicated. It's more like practical stuff for reports.
Hmm.
And yeah, I've just always been a fan of calculation groups. They've always fascinated me. Super powerful, super interesting.
Well, I think there's definitely a mixture of both things that kind of like syntax sugar. It's a word that I love that I think Marco and Alberto kind of coined is there's a lot of stuff that's just syntax sugar where it makes it a lot easier. You can now do in a group rather than 30 measures. And there's also stuff that just literally could not have been done before. I know the number one example that I found was really useful is somebody has like say a single chart and they want to at any point be able to switch between like let's say order counts, dollar amount, and then like a profit percentage, and then you can select it from a slicer and you can change the numbers, but you couldn't ever change the formatting dynamically before. Like you could do a bookmark with different charts, but you couldn't with one measure. It has to be the same format type. Now with calculation groups, that was something literally impossible prior to that. So it's interesting to see both the combination of what has been made easier and what has been impossible made possible. I did just want to take a slight tangent. I'm personally a huge like lover of craft beer, so I'm just wondering like what are considering you come from the beer industry, like what would you say are some of your favorite styles?
Look, I'm pretty standard. I like the normal stuff. Fruited sours, hazy IPAs, imperial stouts.
I wouldn't say fruited sours are super common. I love sour beers, but I definitely know
Yeah,
a lot of people who are just like absolutely like, nope, I do not like sours. It's a weird, it tastes like a vinegary beer. I'm not into those. I love them though. They're probably my one of my favorite styles.
yeah. I guess if you're new to sour beer, you can get in at the entry level and kind of go for something low ABV and just lightly tart, some on a hot day.
Like a goza.
Um, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And then you can kind of build up to the more kind of intense ones. But I understand it. It doesn't really taste like beer to a lot of people. It's something different. So
I'll only just ask one question or one more on that, and then we can talk about calc groups. But have you ever had the Duchess du Bourgogne? It's a beer from Belgium.
I don't believe I have. No.
It's a red Flemish ale. Been around for a while,
Yeah.
but it's kind of a little bit between a lambic and like a Flemish. So it's fairly fruited but sour. And it's objectively or subjectively, I guess, my favorite beer. Period. It is one of those you drink it, it makes you smile. Like it's a really so if you ever see one, it has a picture of she was actually a young princess from back in Belgium from the day. So it has an old like 1800s portrait of a woman on the bottle, and it's Duchess du Bourgogne, if I'm pronouncing it correctly. So if you ever see that bottle, pick it up and try it. You'll probably really like it if you enjoy fruited sours.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll look for it. I always like looking
Cool.
for new beers.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, just bringing it back on subject at least the like tell me how did you end up getting into kind of almost somewhat specializing in just creative, interesting ways to use calculation groups?
A couple of things, really. I guess, like I said, when they came out, I was, probably relatively early in my Power BI journey, and they just kind of blew my mind. And and also, I just realized that there wasn't, apart from SQL BI, there wasn't a lot of material out there on them. People didn't seem to be blogging about them all over the place like they do about everything else in Power BI. So and then I was, building reports and playing around with them, and I started finding stuff, and I thought, maybe I should tell people about this and see if they like it. And I think I posted something, and it got some love, and I thought, it's kind of addictive, that stuff. You find something cool and you post it, and people like it, and then you're like, oh, I got to find something else cool now and post it, and on it went.
Yeah, and I will say that one thing that you've done a good job of cementing yourself in is whoever the initial like front runners are when a new thing comes out will usually be the ones that will people will continually come back to because you were the first some of the first Google searches for things like that, or just people posting on Twitter and stuff. So it gives you a nice advantage to becoming kind of the somewhat of an expert in that subject matter when you're one of the first people out of the gate for that. I know, like for myself, I chose kind of like visualization stuff and design back when. Now a ton of people are doing it, but I know that was not a heavily leaned on thing for a while in Power BI, and it's helped me to submit myself in that niche, and it's certainly I would say for you now with calculation groups.
Yeah, look, I wouldn't call myself an expert. I think
Oh, well, of
I'm
course.
just lucky that that I can play around and have fun with stuff and find things and post it without a lot of research, mind you. So, I really, I would say, if you're new to calculation groups, you should check out the SQL BI articles because those are proper references. But
Yep.
um, what I do is I just have fun with it and hopefully find stuff that's useful for people.
And I mean, I'm right there with you. It's like there's always somebody better, unless you're Marco, then there maybe isn't somebody better. But even he probably, if I've never asked him, but he even might still say there's somebody above him somewhere. Actually, probably the guy who built DAX, maybe. But the thing with DAX is that that you've just kind of hit on is it. There's always I personally, I'm a little hesitant to ever post about DAX because it's a lot easier for somebody to pull that apart versus other stuff. Like if I talk about color design, okay, there is science to it certainly, but there's also a lot of art and preference that goes into it. So it's harder to want to to be able to rip apart that from perspective of people tuning in. Where if I make a mistake in DAX and like somebody calls out, oh, you should have used this function, like oh, okay, I have to do a follow-up video
Yeah.
now. Like I'm always hesitant because I want to make sure I don't steer somebody the wrong way. So at a minimum, I'll usually reach out to maybe my network and, hey guys, I'm about to do a blog on this. Here's kind of the function that I was using for that. Like there might be a slightly better way. I just want to make sure this isn't like a bad way to do something. I'll usually double check just because I'm somewhat paranoid where I get called out like, man, no, why would you tell people this? This is totally the wrong way to do something.
Look, I get it. I'm probably, guilty of that myself. DAX is funny, but I hope that I think that the Power BI community is really supportive. So I think it's great that anyone can kind of put something out there in DAX and hopefully not get torn to shreds too much.
Exactly. And I would say that the community in general is really supportive. Maybe one out of like 100, if not 1,000 comments that I ever get, no, probably not that one out of a few hundred is usually like a negative one or where somebody just straight up is like, man, like, oh, this is a terrible practice. I would never do something this way. You almost never get trolls, I notice with this. Most people are just very happy that you provided a solution. The worst things that I typically get is just somebody who's asking a really basic question. And, it's like, sure, I'll put you to a link to some documentation, but it's still done in a friendly manner. Like, I love the video. Can you tell me how to add a visual to a page? Like, I would hope you know how to put a, new visual onto the page in Power BI, but like, here's a Microsoft white paper that will explain how to do that in case you need to know. All right. Yeah, do you want to get started? I can switch over to the screen whenever you're ready.
Yeah, let's do it.
Perfect. And like I said, and to the people tuning in right now, if you drop any questions that you have as he's going through this demo into the chat window, just start it with a Q, followed by the question. Anything related to what we're going over, I'll basically feed in to Kane as we go through it. But more general questions, you're happy to ask, but I'll just queue them up more for like a generalized Q&A at the end of the presentation.
Beauty. All right. So I do have a few basics to cover, but we'll pretty quickly get into more complex stuff. I would say if you're just experimenting with calculation groups for the first time, there's a couple of things that change in Power BI when you start using them, and that's worth looking at. The first one is implicit measures don't work anymore, which doesn't bother a lot of people because it seems accepted best practice not to use implicit measures. But that's worth being aware of, and also the measure formatting area, the measure tools area, kind of up here. It's slightly different, I've found. I've been using calculation groups for so long, I can't remember what it used to be like, but I know it's not like it is now. And you can use these kind of little icons to change formats, but when you click here, you don't really get the full drop down that I think there usually is, and you just
Correct.
get text, and you can enter format strings straight in, but it's a little bit different. But it shouldn't
If
discourage you.
I have found if you go to the data view, I think, right? I'm so used to calling it relationships. Sorry, the model view. Thank you. It used to be the relationship view. If you go to the model view, in here, I have found that after adding calculation groups, you can still change the formatting, and it gives you the pick list. So the format
Yep.
still does apply in here. And to elaborate on what you just said, I 100% agree that you shouldn't use that as a deterrent. It is a little, as a developer, there is some times where you just want to quickly validate data and you want to drag a column and an aggregation and just immediately see it. So there is a small annoyance with the ability to not just quickly test data. You have to create a measure now to do that. But so hopefully someday maybe they come out with a scenario where when you publish, if you're aggregating any column, you get a warning instead or something like that. But it still is a -1 versus a +100 in gains that you get from actually using the groups themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when I first started using them, it was kind of an annoyance. You have some habits of maybe using some implicit measures for testing and different stuff, and it kind of annoys you a little bit, but you get used to it pretty quickly. So anyway, here's a calculation group. You can see it appears in your model like any other table. This ordinal column is just like a built-in sort column, and I guess the difference from regular tables, you can't create a relationship with this table because represented behind each of these row values is a DAX expression that leverages all of the model relationships. And so I think if you're just starting out, it's really good to be able to define the behavior of calculation groups. And so I've got a definition that I use, but I think it's great to have a good, clear mental image of what they do. So this is my kind of definition. So it's a set of one or more DAX expressions represented as rows of a column that can be applied through the filter context of a report and has a default behavior of replacing any measure that exists in the filter context created by the calculation group. It's a bit of a mouthful. We're going to do a demo. It'll be a lot clearer, but if you can put it into words what calculation groups does, that's a good start. And then my top tip for using calculation groups is understanding the behavior clearly, being specific in controlling the application, and then because the default behavior is to replace or overwrite, a lot of what you need to consider is how to restrict the application to act just on what you want it to act on and protect things that you don't want it to act on. So if you can define what calculation groups are and kind of focus on restricting them and protecting things, I think you'll be all right. So anyway, I've got this this quick demo just to demonstrate the kind of overwrite behavior. I've got a calculation group here that has a number, a string, a date, an expression. The expression is just count rows of date, but you'll see if I click string, this is just a string with no lineage, so you'll see it overwrites everything in the report, every measure, every visual. And then you'll see if I, give me a sec, if I add the same calculation group to the visual, let me find it. I can add it to the hierarchy. You'll see it still has the same overwrite behavior, but the behavior changes. It's just good to play around with that stuff and
Hmm.
understand that kind of overwrite behavior. Um, Obviously, I've got this expression count rows of date. If we use that, you'll see that all of a sudden, because it's a proper expression, it leverages the model relationships. It still overwrites all the measures, but you get 28 days in Feb, 31 in Jan, and we've got 5,113 rows in the date table. So yeah, I just thought I'd cover that quickly just to show how, the reason is, we've got this slicer that's acting on the whole report, so it overwrites the whole report. Wherever you kind of insert the calculation group in the filter context, it'll overwrite. There's also 4 different ways that you can apply calculation groups. You can apply them in a slicer like this. You can add them straight to a visual as an axis or a legend, or any way you can drop a column in, which we showed before. You can reference them straight in a measure. So in this one, I've just used it as a calculate filter. I've used my string,
Hmm.
referenced it like a normal column. And if I chuck on a card and drop my measure in, take off my expression here that's overriding it, you'll see I get my string. So you can reference them that way. And then you can also drop them in the filter pane here, which is really useful because it means that you can create like a giant list of time intelligence calculation items. And then I'll create a slicer here to demo. And I'll drop in a calculation group. So I've got this calculation group as a slicer, and then you can just pick and choose what items you want to include. So if you've got 100, maybe not 100, let's say 30 time intelligence
Yeah.
calculations, you can just choose to include 3 or 4 that you need for the report. So I find
Yep.
that's super useful. There is a bug as well where the default behavior in the pane is it'll just let you do single select. You've got to hold down control to be able to do multi-select.
Oh, I didn't actually.
Um,
I noticed the bug, but it's yeah, okay. I have yet to actually need the ability to multi-select yet for calculation groups, but it's good to know that it's not completely enforced. It's partially enforced, but the control at least overrides
yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah. Someone on Twitter pointed that out to me. It's very useful. But that lets you do, being able to use the filter pane too lets you do cool stuff like I've got this calculation group that randomizes all the data in your report. And it's basically just selected measure times rand, which, the selected measure references any measure being evaluated. And obviously rand generates a new random number each time it's evaluated. I've got these 4 tens up here, which are just 4 different measures with 10 in them, just to show that it actually randomizes. And if you add it as a filter on the page, it randomizes every number in your report. So it's good for protecting data if you need to show a report to someone, or even, if you want to add like a button to a report that just, says someone's looking at this report that shouldn't be, you click the button, your report's random. So that's kind of cool. But yeah, that's all I've got really for basics. I mean, we're going to jump in now to the examples. The first one, I'll show you what we're going for. And I'm actually going to walk through step by step the first one, which might be a bit painful. But I think it's a really good one for showing some of the pitfalls and the problems that you run into and kind of the thinking that you need to have for building stuff in calculation groups. So it's worth going through from the start. Some of the ones after that, I'm just going to, talk through the code and that it won't be so painful. But, we'll fumble through this one together, see how we go.
I think it's a good
Um,
approach.
yeah. So the end result is this combo chart, and you got 2 slices where you can choose any 2 kind of metrics to combine for columns and the line, and then you've got an additional slicer that lets you turn labels on and off to make it kind of clearer. So I can put sales amount here, and I can say I don't want to see the margin on the line. I want to see the bar metric, and it shows your column axis over here. Then if I turn the labels off on the columns, I get my line axis and get my my line labels, and you can choose any 2 different metrics that you want to combine. So that's what we're going for.
It's I've definitely done the top one before, which is like switching between the visuals. I've not actually used it to turn off labels before. So like that's the one that I think will be really interesting to see.
Yeah, and look, there's some interactions between calculation groups within the same visual that are kind of tricky. So you might think it sounds kind of easy, like, oh yeah, we'll just make a couple slices and choose some different action. It hides some complexity, so we'll give it a go. So the first thing I'm going to do is let me find where I am.
I just want to say while
Uh,
you're looking that up, we're bouncing between like 40 to 45 concurrent viewers, so there's quite a few people tuning in for this, which is
oh,
awesome.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Cool. Yeah, so I'm going to open Tabular Editor. The first thing you'd probably, well, you might do if you were approaching this is create some calculation groups with some measures in it. So I'll do that. I'll create two new calculation groups in Tabular Editor. And I'm going to call the first one sales metric 1. So we'll use that for our column component of the chart. And then we'll call this one sales. I'm a really terrible typer, so bear with me. Sales metric 2. And then we'll create some calculation items. Put in 4. And we'll go sales amount. Sales quantity. Margin. And margin percentage. And I'll set the ordinal. There's a weird bug. I don't know if you've realized it, but like when you create calculation items, they all probably can't see it. They all have this ordinal of -1. And then when you set the ordinal, like I'll grab my one that I want first, sales amount, you put in 0, it drops
Yep.
it to the bottom, and then you put in 0 again, and it puts it back at the top, and everything's in the order it should be. I don't know why that is, but
So I've
it's
actually
just what it is.
I I know enough about that to know like that's somewhat the order of precedence in terms of certain calculations and other stuff like that, and what gets considered the. I've also used that column because it gets added into the calculation group as a second column in that table. I use that to sort. So like there's times where
Yeah.
I like it's kind of nice because there's often you have you'll have a slicer and a pick list and you want them in a certain order. I've honestly used that more often to put the sort order than actually probably for any order of precedence that's needed for like more advanced calculations. Because I think similar to you, most of my actual calculations that I'm doing in the groups aren't that complex. It's usually because I'm wanting to dynamically change around stuff or organize things.
Yeah, well, actually, the ordinal, I believe the only purpose for the ordinal is sort order, but you might
Okay.
be thinking of precedence as well. So
Oh
you
yeah,
have,
I think I was conflating the
yeah,
two.
yeah. So precedence will, the higher the precedence number, the earlier the calculation,
Correct.
the earlier it'll get calculated. So if you have two
Yep.
groups, one will go first. But yeah, the ordinal, as far as I can tell, is only for sort. So
Okay, yeah,
um,
I was conflating the two then, because I've certainly watched a few videos from Markle on precedence and all of that, and for some reason my brain was thinking that that was related to it. But it works perfectly for sorting if you have any text-based fields that you want to include on a list or a slicer or anything like that.
sorry, I'm just fumbling around here. I'm just going to copy paste these across to
You
here.
want to zoom in
Okay,
just a
so we
little bit
got,
on that one?
yeah, so I just
There you
got
go.
two calculation groups with identical calculation items, and each one just directly references a measure. So they're very simple. They're just straight up calculation groups with measures. I'm just going to fix the sort order on this one. And we'll save that, and we'll drop them into our chart and have a look what happens. Refresh. We'll drag this one in here. And just to make sure that we keep things clear, I'll call this one column metric, and we'll call this one line metric. And then we'll need a chart. So I'm just going to copy in my chart from my other report. and I'll drag in some measures for them to act upon, for the slices to act upon. So you always need a measure present to apply the calculation group for. So I've dragged in cost and margin, so they look different. But if we try and select a metric, it basically just makes the line and the column the same. And if we select this one, nothing happens. And if we select quantity in this one, nothing happens. And all that's working is the first slicer and the second one's not. And the reason for that is that the first calculation group, the column metric, probably has a higher precedence. And what's happening is it's just overriding our filter context for this slicer is the entire report. It's overriding both measures that we've used for the column and the line. So you're not getting any differentiation. So what we need to do to fix that is just tell each calculation group to act upon a specific measure. And when we've got like calculation groups like this, where they're just simple, sets of measures that are going to overwrite an existing measure, I like to create like a specific measure within each one. Sorry, that'll just like a clear reference for the code for the a clear reference for that calculation group to work on. So it's kind of like a placeholder, a dedicated measure that that calculation can work on. So I call this one metric 1 measure, and I usually just put 0 in there. I feel like I've run into problems using blank or other stuff, and I also give it like a format. I don't know if you need to, but I have a feeling I've run into issues before with format strings if you haven't got a format applied to a measure. So do that, and in this one I'll create a measure for this calculation group to work on. I'll call that metric 2 measure, keep that 0, make it dollars. So it's going to give us something to point the calculation group at. So I'm going to get rid of these dummy kind of measures that I had in there. I'm going to put in my purpose-built dedicated measures.
So I've done this similarly before, where it's like the measure itself doesn't actually do anything other than the well requires a measure to display, but it's because it's the intersection of your calculation groups determine, this is my X and Y basically. Here's the two filters, and then so based off of this, the calculation group now says what to render that.
Yeah, 100%. I couldn't have explained it better. It's like a meeting point for your filter context and your calculation groups, basically. But the actual measure is kind of meaningless.
Can you do something quickly where one thing that actually helped me with this is, could you just quickly convert it to a table? That actually does show kind of like what this looks like. So maybe just swap it to a table, and then you can just Control Z. But yeah, like what it does is there's your 2 points. If you want to zoom in, like you have May and then whatever it is, and like that. In this case, you just have one filter, but it's the calculation group that's just saying what to calculate for any of those. So it's really just a placeholder. And I've actually done similar where people who've come from finance, they have those Frankenstein tables that they build in Excel where you have a series of like nested subtotals and interesting like custom date columns at the top. And I built something like that before where I have these overlapping complex date periods basically on columns, a bunch of like a dozen or so metrics and subtotals on rows, and I basically built 2 calculation groups, put them on rows and columns, put a blank measure in the middle of it, and the measure doesn't do diddly. It's just it's simply there with a equals 0, but the calculation groups say if it's this and that, calculate this and this. So it calculated like 100 different calculations in this grid, but it just had a dummy measure to allow it to actually render on the page.
Yeah. Absolutely. So it's that kind of default replace behavior that whatever measure exists in the filter context is automatically replaced by the calculation group, which is confusing for some people because often you reference selected measure and they think, it's transforming what's there. But really, I think selected measure just grabs what's there and inserts it in the calculation that's replacing the measure kind of thing. So I'm just going to go into Tabular Editor again, and what we need to do is just add a little protection in. We're going to say if, I'll zoom in on this in a sec, I'll just put it in there, is selected measure, and we'll put in our metric one measure, then sales amount. So I'll just zoom in, hang on a sec. So we're just saying is selected measure just means the measure that's being evaluated, so our blank dummy kind of measure. We're just saying if the measure in the filter context is metric one measure, then return sales amount. So we're just pointing the calculation group to act only on the measure that we built for it. And I'm just going to, bear with me, I'll quickly dump this into the other ones. So spoiler, this also isn't going to work, but it's a start. And then for this one, we need to reference metric measure 2.
If you want to do the control zoom, you don't have to use the zoom tool, but if you just hold the control key and scroll your mouse wheel, and that should increase the text size in there. There you go.
Yeah, look at that.
And
I knew there was a trick.
And here's an example where I'll actually switch to the. There you go. All right, you can still hear me, but now you can see the whole measure. Yeah, it's just like writing DAX in Excel in the measure window. Control scroll and in Power BI works really well.
Cool. Yep. So I'll save those. So I've just added that in for each one, and we'll see what happens. And so now I'm getting different results when I click my slicer here. I get the line metrics working, so the calculation group is acting on the measure that I've created it, and it's pointing to the right measure. One's working on the line, one's working on the bar. But when I select them both, I get blank. So the reason for that is go back into Tabular Editor, and so the reason for that is that the default else part or alternate in if is blank. So what we're saying is if the measure being evaluated is metric one measure, return sales amount, otherwise blank. If it's not metric measure one, make it blank. And we know that calculation groups have that overwrite behavior. So what's happening is when we select both, they're blanking each other. One calculation group is saying that it's not metric measure one, so blank, and the other one is saying it's not metric measure two, so blank. So it's a trap. It's a really easy one, but you always have to almost always need to put in an alternate here of selected measure. Oh, come on, man.
You hiccuped a couple of seconds, and it gave me a small heart attack, but we're good. Yeah, it looks like you froze for a brief second, but I think you're fine again. Sometimes just a bandwidth thing.
Okay. So I'm just putting in an alternate because the calculation groups were blanking each other, and so you always have to have that alternate result in there to say what am I doing wrong here? Failing. All right, bear with me. I'll try and put this in quickly. Good, so I think we're good. No, what have I done wrong here? Too many commas.
I feel like that's the bane of any coder's existence is it's either there's either too few or too many commas or too few or too many parentheses.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's see if it's working. Yep. So now we get our different metrics working against each other. But the problem is the format's all messed up. So when I choose margin percent, I'm getting like a whole number. If I choose margin percentage up here, I'm getting dollars, and that's all messed up. And that's because we need to set the format string now. So every calculation item has an expression. It also has a format string expression, which lets you put in a format string. So I'm just going to copy some in. I promise that my other examples aren't as painfully slow as this, but I did think it would be good to go through the process that I would probably go through of like making all the mistakes, you know.
This is Dax, by the way. So like I think everybody here tuning in knows that this isn't the there's a certain level of step process that goes through this.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, I'm just copying in some format strings from Power BI, and I guess this is a whole number, so we'll just do something like that. Will do, and then we'll copy those across really quick to our other calculation group. All right, so that is a format string in the format string expression for each one, and still not working. And the reason is same reason as before, exactly the same. It doesn't. We've got bleeding over from the line metric into the column metric, and we've got percentage, carrying over. So essentially, it's exactly the same as the format string, the expression. We need to add in all that protection and that kind of stuff into our format string as well, so that we're restricting that. So that's what I was meaning about, it's really important to focus on being very specific in how you apply the calculation groups and making sure that you're, protecting stuff. So I'll zoom in again, sorry. We need to add in the same protection for our format string, where we say if it's metric measure 1, do this format string. And we also need to put in, if not, we need to do selected measure format string.
And I just want to
This is the
mention
last step.
I was just going to quickly mention too, and I'll bring it up at the end. For the people tuning in, this file, a lot of the stuff that he's working on will be available to download. If you go to the description below, there's a link to the blog files section on my site, and in the blog files area there will be a spot for today's video with a link to download this if you wanted to look at it later.
Awesome. All right, bear with me. This is the last step, and then you won't have to painfully watch me entering DAX.
I mean, I don't know about anybody else, but I sip my coffee to watch DAX. It's great. Like every time that Marco Norberto comes out with a video, I'll just be sitting there with wide eyes, like, okay, what am I going to learn today?
Yeah, me too. All right, we're getting there. I ran through this demo a few times and I messed things up a lot with so much copy paste. So let's see how we go.
One of my favorite things, just while like monitoring the chat thread as you're talking about this, is sometimes a one person tuning in will ask a question and then it's just answered by somebody else in the forum. And in this case, there's some DAX questions that are being asked about calculation groups, and there's a good conversation going on around it. It's great.
Oh, good. That's great. Yeah. All right, we're almost there.
I feel like what you need to do to up my production at some point is I want to I want to get like a button that just adds like some epic like movie music. So when this is happening, there's just like this orchestra going behind you, just playing like to a crescendo that drops when you finally hit execute.
Yeah, I'm probably like an advertisement for tabular editor kind of scripts for creating stuff. Probably should have
Exactly.
created some kind of script to script all this stuff or something. But it's only four items, so I'm done now. Fingers crossed I haven't stuffed anything up. All right, let's save it. Let's have a look. Cool, so we got sales amount in dollars, we got margin percentage, all the formats are correct, and we can choose any combination that we want. And I've implemented this solution in a report, and it actually you might think it's overly complicated for use, but actually Blue uses a way. I know you can do other stuff with letting them choose metrics in visuals. There's a Power BI feature, I can't remember what it's called, but it's quite simple. I think people like this solution where you can look at sales amount and margin or other useful KPIs and stuff and view them against each other. So now we just need to control the labels. I mean, it doesn't look too bad now, but I always find with combo charts, depending on the axis and stuff, they can get really cluttered. And sometimes, you're only really looking at one metric and you want something, a trend comparison or something. So we want to be able to let users turn metrics on and off. So the way to do that is I've created a disconnected table. I've already created it. It's just called data labels. Got no line labels and no. I'll make that column labels. No line labels, no column labels, and it's got just a basic disconnected table. So we'll drag that in here. And then what we can do with the calculation group is just add something to our format string. And this is kind of my first kind of tip for format strings is you can use the 0 width space Unicode character to return a blank format string, which actually just means it doesn't return any label. So I'm just going to copy in here real quick.
And to your thing too, like the combo chart is honestly like one of my favorite ones too. It's you've kind of just hit the nail on the head where it can get a little busy, but usually the reason you use that is you're wanting to show some kind of a ratio or trend line of something, and then the other information behind it is kind of almost the supplemental. One of my favorite things to put into a report is prior month and current month on column, and then the percentage up and down on the line, just to kind of show you like how are you doing as a delta in terms of increasing or decreasing values by date period comparisons. And it's such a clean, great way to present that, keeping the percentages, the data labels on the line, and then turning off the data labels for the columns behind it. But without calculation groups, you have to choose from a developer to either have them on or off. You can't really let the client choose.
Yeah. No, I found this technique pretty useful for my reporting. So what I'm doing is we're just adding in this extra bit of logic that says, so if we're evaluating, when we're in our column chart calculation group, if we're evaluating the metric 1 measure and the selected value of our disconnected table is no column labels. Sorry, I've got a bad habit of saying bar.
I do the same. Yeah, I do the same thing.
Yeah, and I've actually put it.
You
Column.
just
Let me change
just start
that.
describing it as the not square.
Yeah.
The not square object.
If I got it all, yes. So we've said if we're evaluating metric measure 1 and the disconnected table selection is no column labels, return a 0 width space Unicode character, so that'll just return a blank label. Otherwise, if we're evaluating metric 1 measure, return the format string. Otherwise, the selected measure format string. So it's a little bit clunky, but this will let us use the disconnected table to. I just copy it in real quick. And this is the last steps, and then we can get into more fun stuff that doesn't involve all this copy pasting code. Cool, and got to remember to change this to metric 2 measure so that we act on the right measure. All right, we'll save that and we should be good to go. So now if we select no column labels, we messed something up there. We got no. Let me see what I broke.
What also this apparently lets you do is it actually turns off. You could actually turn off not just labels. You could turn off the axis label. It looks like because that just turned off all labels.
Yeah, you can turn off the axis, and what happens is when you select like no column labels, it'll turn off the column axis and only show the line axis.
Okay.
When you select no line labels, it'll turn off the column axis. You'll see it kind of it looks a bit weird at first until you realize what it's doing. I'll show you when we jump back in. So yeah, I forgot to change the selected value there, but we should be good to go now. So if I select, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I was just I can almost see that as actually being useful for, I would personally say I don't recommend like, PDF exports and people who like to print Power BI reports, but there's a certain level of like, you have to kind of build a report to make that work. And that's, usually hiding scroll bars and other stuff, but like the ability to actually turn on and off labels like that, because you normally want more when you print, that actually is kind of nice if you had something where you could kind of create a printer friendly mode and turn on some extra labels when people are doing like a PDF export with this feature, considering you can turn off and on any label that's on this on a visual.
Yeah, no, that's a good point actually. Yeah, you could just have a button that just turns off a bunch of labels for print mode or something. It's a good idea.
Yep.
Yeah, so you can see we get, if we just have no column labels, we get the line labels and the line axis. And then if I click no line labels, we get the column axis and the column labels. And then if I get rid of both, we can have both. So that's pretty much it. There's one other option that I had in my my finished result, which I'll just show you real quick. I also put in a blank option here, which I'll show you how that works. So it's just a blank, and it's the same thing. It just says if, so let me zoom in, if it's metric measure 1, return blank or selected measure, and the format string is blank. And what that lets you do is it just says like, so maybe the user doesn't want a line in there, they just want to see a column. So you can just leave the line metric blank and put your labels on here, and you've just got a normal column chart. Just kind of how I set it up to default in reports is I might just have it as a column chart, but then there's this like extra option if you want to overlay something. Okay, cool, show me margin percentage over sales, and don't bother showing me sales, just show me margin or something like that. So it gives you a bit of flexibility if you got the blanks in there. So that's it for that one. My next one will be a bit faster, is this dynamic labels example. So I've got just a line chart, and I've got this red dot that says lowest value and this green dot that says highest value. And it's dynamic. If you select different channel names, it evaluates the highest and lowest depending on your slicer selection. There's a couple others selections in here, just all values, which is everything, and some other ones which aren't as interesting, just a highest value with a string and a lowest value with a string. But really, this highest and lowest one's probably the one that we'll look at that is probably the most interesting. So it's actually quite a simple concept. You're really just trying to use some DAX to pull out a specific point in the chart, and then tell the format string to print something for that value and blank everything else. So the value could be anything. I mean, you could say, well, if the day equals 20th of Jan, write 20th of Jan, otherwise blank or whatever. But I'll show you the code in Tabular Editor. And let me switch to my other file real quick. So yeah, I've got this labels calculation group, and for all of these, the expression is just selected measure. So we're not transforming the measure in any way. We're just letting I think it's sales amount. We're just letting sales amount come through, and then in the format string expression, we're just basically picking up the visible dates in the chart as a table of the visible dates in the chart, and then we're iterating it to find the highest value, iterating it to find the lowest value, and then we've got a simple, I'll zoom this in, sorry. Yeah, so iterating to find the highest and lowest values, and then we've got a switch statement that just says if the measure being evaluated is equal to the highest value in the chart, append highest to the selected measure format string. If it's the lowest value, then put lowest and put selected measure format string. Otherwise, return a 0 width space Unicode. So yeah, there's not much to it really. I mean, the key to it is the conditional formatting, that which I'll show you. But there is a couple of quirks. One thing is you'll see if I select this line chart and I go in here. I mean, I could be wrong, but I haven't actually got marker turned on here, but there's markers. And then if I go into data colors, there's no conditional formatting thing here. And if I click show all, like you can see it's adding colors to certain data points, but I can't see anywhere in this line chart to control that. So the way that I have to get there, I don't know if there's another way, but you actually start with a column chart where you can apply your conditional formatting here. And then when you convert it back to a line chart, it seems to keep the conditional formatting somehow, and you get these cool kind of colored dots. So I don't know if that's just a little trick.
It's actually
so,
that's actually a video that I did a couple of years ago exactly on that. It's it's one of those, is a debug or a feature kind of a thing, but I did check with the
yeah.
Microsoft team, and it would be nice if the F of X button was actually on the line chart, but it's not going to go away. They're not going to patch that and get rid of it because enough people have implemented it. But you can basically, start with like a column chart, apply conditional formatting, and then it will stay and reliably work on the line chart. The one disadvantage is you can't choose the shape or the size of the dot. Only the color can be formatted.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I just discovered it, so I wasn't aware of it before, so I thought it was kind of cool. Yeah, so and then the conditional formatting for it, I've basically just replicated what I did in the calculation group. I've said, return me a table of the date values, show me the highest one and the lowest one. So the difference with this is you can't apply conditional formatting to selected measure, so you can't create like a calculation group and then create some conditional formatting that'll work for it no matter what measure you're using, or I haven't found a way. You can't use a calculation group in conditional formatting. You can't reference selected measures. So what you have to do is, like in this chart, I've used sales amount as the measure. I've had to reference sales amount for the conditional formatting. It'd be really cool if like calculation groups had a conditional format expression, or if you could use selected measure in conditional formatting, it would make working with them heaps easier. But basically what I've said here is if the selected value of the calculation group is all values, return grey. If the selected value is highest and lowest values and the sales amount equals the highest, return green, on and on, return in different colours for each one. And that's how you get this to work, essentially. I mean, what I like about this one, what I think is one of the coolest things, is the ability to return two values from a slicer selection. So
Yep.
if I wanted to, I could, I'll just do a quick demo. If I take, zoom in, I'll take my format string expression and put it in my expression. And I'll just change the format string expression back to selected measure format string. Ah, that's painful. And I'll change this to be, if selected measure is the highest, then return selected measure. And we'll go save that. Yep. Format string's wrong. Where am I here? Labels, format string. What's wrong with that format string? Got a comma. So yeah, you can, now I've got a slicer that can pull out two values from a chart. I just think that's super cool that you can do it so easily. Just create a slicer that can say, "Oh, return me two values or three values," or you could create like a threshold and say, "Just return me all the values over this threshold," and do it so quickly and easily. For me, that's a really cool thing. All right, next example I got. I'll show you the end result is a tooltip. So
One of my favorite things to play around with in Power BI is unique ways to use tooltips and report page tooltips.
yeah, I love tooltips. I think the idea behind this one was in my job I sometimes end up with big tables and numbers. People want to see tables and numbers, tables and tables of numbers with detail. Some people want to see detail, and sometimes it's hard to look at a table of numbers and there's no context. You say is this value high or low or what? So I wanted to create this tooltip that you hover over a value and it shows you what the value is, and then over the last 6 months what the minimum of that was, the average and the maximum of that category was, and then what the last month was. So just to give a heap of context around that data point.
Just a really quick
And
question
so the
too,
way,
and this
yeah,
this is an easy answer, but like, is Tabular Editor the only way to create calculation groups for Power BI? If you're working with Power BI Desktop, yeah, you need Tabular Editor to create these. That's the best method for doing it. You cannot do that from Power BI Desktop itself.
correct. Yep. All right. So the way to implement this, it's pretty basic, but it's a good kind of concept. Is that I've created my matrix here, and I've put a whole bunch of measures in the well here. My margins, margin percentage, sales quantity, sales, and I've got 1 month selected, and I've created a calculation group for my my min, max, and average kind of values, which look like this. So I've just summarized sales by month, and I've added a column with selected measure as the value. Whatever you're evaluating is evaluated for each month. I've used a different iterator like average or max or whatever to pull out the value, and then I've just wrapped it in Calculate to force it to look at the last 6 months. But it's good to know here that I've wrapped it in Calculate, but you don't need to. A lot of the examples out there for calculation groups just change wrap selected measure in Calculate. You don't have to use Calculate. I mean, you can just use this inside part here. You can play with selected measure in any DAX that you want. You don't need to use Calculate for it. Yeah, so I've also just got a basic last month measure, and current value is just selected measure. So minimum, that's how that works. And in the tooltip, I've put my calculation group. It's not showing all the values here because I haven't got a date filter on it, but I've just dropped in my calculation group as the axis, and I've put summer sales amount as the measure for it to work upon because I haven't created a dedicated measure for it or anything. And my idea is, we know calculation groups work on any measure. I've used selected measure in my calculation group, so I should be able to hover over one of these values and pop up a tooltip. But what happens is I hover over margin percentage and all I get back is sales amount. And the reason is, a tooltip, from what I understand, acts pretty much like a drill through page, and that it just passes all the filters to the tooltip to evaluate what's in the tooltip. So In the filter context right now, we just have April 2013, home, office, and phones. And margin percentage that we're hovering on isn't part of the filter context. It's a measure, so it's not filtering. So what's happening is the tooltip's picking up April 2013 and home, office, and phones, and it's evaluating my calculation group for sales amount because that's the measure that's present. So we know, though, that we can introduce measures into the filter context using calculation groups. So if I remove all these measures from the well, I'll just leave one measure for the calculation group to act upon, and then drop it in my calculation group as the columns. That's not right. What have I done wrong there? Huh. Not sure what's gone wrong. Let me jump into my other example that works. So what I've done, I've dropped my calculation group, my that's what I did wrong. Now I see. Let me fix it. I dropped the wrong calculation group in. So I need I've created a simple calculation group with my measures that I want in the matrix. So it's just this tooltip matrix here, and sorry, I was trying to zoom in on. Yeah, so it's just the same measures that I had in the table essentially. Oh, my keyboard stopped working for some reason. Can't get out of Zoom. There. So if I drag my calculation group in as the columns, it puts my measures into my matrix. And now when I hover over, because the calculation group, the measures are now acting as a filter and become part of the filter context, they can get passed to the tooltip. So I get my values for percentage, I can get my values for dollars, I can get my values for the different measures. And so it's a simple way to do it. All you really need to do is make sure you've got a calculation group in your tooltip, and you've got a calculation group in your report, so your measures in your matrix, so your measures can get inserted into the filter context, and it just works. All right, getting there. I've got another quick one I want to show you. Speaking about just quickly, where is it? Just on inserting measures into the filter context. I think it's another one of those really cool things about calculation groups. You can see here that I've actually put a calculation group as the top level of a hierarchy. So there's no other way you can do that, where you can have like KPIs and have categories underneath them really quickly and simply. And you can list percentages and dollars in the same report. And I've got to give a shout out here to my friend on Twitter, Jeff Weir, Insights Machine, I think is his name. Jeff, you probably all know Jeff. He created this.
He's on these chats occasionally too, so I don't see him today, but
he created this brilliant calculation group that he shared with me that it formats numbers automatically. So you can see I'm just using it here. You can do no decimal, 1 decimal, or 2 decimals. You click on 1 decimal and everything goes 1 decimal. It automatically adds thousands, millions, or billions, and it skips percentages. So like in a scenario like this, it's absolutely essential, because otherwise where you're mixing formats in the same table, you really need it. I won't go into the code because it's his genius little piece of DAX, but you can probably chase him up on Twitter for it, or he'll probably share it at some point or something. But yeah, that's a really cool one too. He did a really good job on that one.
I had a quick question just related to matrix tables. Gopa was just asking, when you use calculation groups in a matrix, can you still apply conditional formatting?
No, it works differently. It can be handy. I'm trying to remember. It can be handy in. I believe I've found it to be handy in some scenarios, but it'll. Oh, hang on. What have I done there? Is that right? Yeah, so it'll only, when you go to that's field formatting, sorry, conditional formatting. When you go here, you've got sum of sales amounts, so only the measure, and I can turn it on and it's not going to conditional format all the, oh no, it does, yeah, sorry. So it does, it applies to all of the calculation items. So I've only got sales amount here, and the same conditional formatting will apply to every item in the table. So it's kind of not that useful because you can see here that sales amount's a big number. So, it kind of isn't well related to all these to show conditional formatting. But I have used it before where you can do something like, just say if it's a negative number, highlight it red or something, that'll work. So you can use it, but you just got to be aware it'll act across all values in the matrix. All right. So my last example here is just a bit more, some more fun with format strings. Let me bring up Tabular Editor. So I'm just going to delete these that I made so I can remake them. So I've just created a calculation group, and I'm going to create a couple of calculation items for this report. Well, I guess firstly, I've got this basic report. It's got margin by month here, and I've got a month year slicer here. So it's pretty simple. And I'm going to create a calculation item called margin percentage. I'm just going to put selected measure in the expression. I'm going to say, so what would happen if we put margin percentage as the format string? So we're referencing the measure as the format string instead of the expression. We'll save that. It's not going to work because I've already showed us in Tabular Editor that it's not going to work. But we'll give it a go. We'll add it's a kind of a silly idea. Why would you put it in the format string expression? And it says no can do, format strings busted. But what I found is kind of a cool little trick is with format strings. Well, one thing with format strings is I haven't figured out all the rules. Sometimes when you reference like selected measure format string, you can append stuff to the start, but not to the end. You've got to play around with that. But I have found that if you put a measure in format string expression, you can append. Look, give me a sec. You can append blank to it, and it'll let you return the calculation. So now if we click margin percentage, returns the margin percentage. The format's all messed up though, and we're like, well, how can we fix that? We're already in a format string, and what are we going to do? So what I can do, so we can create a variable formatted. Whoa, that's a crazy variable. Formatted string. And we can go format margin percentage, and we can give it a percentage format. Let me find one somewhere. Sorry guys, let me find one. Got too many windows open. All right. Found a format string. Sorry, formatted.
Or you want to just zoom in on that a little bit.
Yeah,
there you go.
Formatted string
Beautiful.
is, we'll go format margin percentage as a percentage. And then we can return blank and formatted string. Can you believe I did that? That's so bad. Sorry, I'll really try and type it quickly again. That's live streams, eh?
There you go.
Uh,
Totally fine. One of those, like the amount that people are learning from this, I'm sure they're all like, yeah, you take a couple extra seconds. You're good.
it's my last example, so I can take a bit of time.
Exactly.
And we return blank and formatted string, and we save it. And we save it. Okay, let's see if that works. No, it's saying I made a mistake somewhere. And we save it. And let's see what happens. So that's cool. We can return the margin percentage as a format string now. So where I think this is handy is you don't have to change the underlying visual at all, and you can get like a quick glance. It's very fast. You can get a quick glance at different numbers. You can just shift the number in the label. Probably not as ideal in a bar chart as maybe like in a table. It might be a good way to, you've got a table here with month, year, and margin, and you can quickly go, well, what is the margin percentage? All right, that's what it is. So I've got another one that I can do with this. Call this percentage on LY. And I'm just going to copy paste some of this in. Just give me 1 sec. I lost my code. I'm finding it. So I guess the thing about format string expressions is, we've done a measure, but you can do more than a measure. I mean, you can put complex DAX calculations
Mm-hmm.
in a format string. So I've got one here. I'm just going to find a percentage. I've got a typical, the current year is selected measure for the same period last year, and then use those to make a percentage. And then we're going to format that percentage like we did before. And then I've got this expression. I'll zoom this in, sorry. And then I've got this expression. So we've got current year, prior year, we've calculated a percentage, formatted the percentage, and then we've said if the current year is not blank and last year is not blank, then if the current year is less than the prior year, return a Unicode up arrow with on last year and my formatted percentage. Otherwise, return if the current year is less than last year, return a Unicode down arrow with on last year and my formatted percentage. Otherwise, return Unicode blank. And then if the year is blank, selected measure format string. Essentially just formatting, yeah?
I was just going to say there's one other thing that I've actually really like to do is I know you use the unichar function. One thing that I learned a couple of years ago actually from a student is that you can put the character in quotes directly in to the measure without actually having to put the number in there. Because if you look at this in 6 months, like, wait, what is, like, you're not going to remember what 9,650 is, but if you actually, use that Windows key and semicolon, you get the kind of the list of symbols, or you can just type in the ASCII character. So you can put them directly
that's
into
a great
it.
idea. Yeah.
Yeah. I have a couple of videos
yeah.
on that on my channel, but they both work identically, but it reads a lot better when the symbol is directly into there.
Yeah.
And I'll usually like declare a variable at the very top of the thing with the symbols, and then just refer to up arrow, down arrow, etc.
Yeah, that makes so much sense to me. I will definitely do that. So we'll save that and we'll give it a refresh. And so when we click our percentage on last year, it doesn't work. Oh, why not? Works in this one.
And I will say, just to give like probably like a 15-minute time check. We're at 10:15 now, and I'll probably wrap up about 10:30 at the latest, just to not go on
Yeah,
for too
cool.
long. But like with this thing, there's just you could spend so much time with so many examples. There's a lot of cool stuff to review.
Yeah, this is the end pretty much. So we're almost done. I realized I put my um, format string in my expression instead of my format expression. Cool. So we click percentage on, and what we get is these cool little labels with up and down arrows, and on last year and 36%. So I just think that's kind of a fun thing where you don't have to change visuals. It's very fast, and probably in a table like this where you're looking at margin, you can give a user, okay, well, that's the margin. So what's the percentage? That's the percentage. How is it on last year? That's on last year. And I guess just a little hack that you can use a measure or and just format it in that format expression. Yeah, that's it. I hope everyone's got a few things out of that where they can find some stuff to use in their reports and a bit more confident to delve into calculation groups. Yeah, thanks for having me on, Reed. I guess give me a follow on Twitter
Oh,
if sorry.
oh, so yeah, I just
I think
realized
you're on mute
I was
there.
on mute. Yeah, I try to do that in case I have to cough or anything. I was just saying, like, yeah, there's at least a few dozen things that I'm sure people are taking away from this. I will also say to anybody in this right now, I have a couple questions queued that I'm going to direct towards us now. Any other remaining questions, go ahead and drop that into the chat. We have probably another 10, 12 minutes or so. But let me spin up my queue here. Where are we at? There it is. Okay. Um, let's start with this one. I'll just work my way backwards. So do you guys ever use C or C Sharp to script automated measures table groups? Kane, I'll let you go first. I have my comment on this as well.
Look, I'm aware of it and I've dabbled in it, but I haven't explored it fully with calculation groups. I've used some scripts to like just create, replace things in measures and stuff like that. But uh, it's probably something I want to look at more. How you can, just generate predefined kind of calculation groups for any model because you use selected measure in lots of calculation groups, they can kind of be model independent in some ways, unless you're referencing columns. But if you kind of have a standard naming conventions for columns and stuff, you could probably build some calculation groups that you can just go bam into any model that you're working on, kind of. So it's something I definitely want to look at, but I haven't done a lot of it.
Yeah, and I would say similar for me with the with C Sharp that is in um, that is inside of Tabular Editor. I mean I don't code in that. I've started to learn it just because it's useful for that. There's also some great common patterns that's on the GitHub for Tabular Editor, and that it's constantly being added to and updated. So a lot of really good ones for like formatting all measures, formatting all DAX columns. Those kind of automation scripts. That's a great starting point. And there's ways to I think start to learn from that, and that's honestly where I've learned from it is watching the patterns in there. Okay, well if it's called this, what about this one? And I do know that with Tabular Editor 3 and some of the other ones coming out, there's going to be more IntelliSense and other things that will help you write it. But it certainly is really nice to have the automations. And the one thing that I would recommend is one of my favorite things is the best practices analyzer. The Tabular Editor 3's GitHub has a page you can link to and configure in Tabular Editor where it basically scans through and it looks for any unformatted columns or measures, any column relationships that between two columns with different names, things like that can kind of help you quickly patch those. And that's another really good way to quickly clean up a model, especially if somebody hands you a PBX file. So I could be a lot better at it, but I definitely utilize that feature. That's one of my favorite parts of Tabular Editor is applications on multiple things where you can do in 5 seconds what would otherwise take you half an hour to maybe do in Power BI Desktop. Okay, let me funnel a couple more questions into here. see if you. Here we go. And I think this one was answered a little bit, but let me actually pop up this one. There's a more recent one. I want to confirm before asking this other one if it was answered on the forum. So here is a new one. And I'm actually going to switch over to us. There we go. Okay.
Yeah, so I have heard about this from people that I've talked to with calculation groups, and I think I haven't had it happen to me personally, but I've spoken to someone that's happened to, so there might be some kind of bug there. In general, I think calculation groups have gotten better as I've used them. They are, definitely fixing bugs, and things are getting improved. Particularly performance seems to have improved heaps. But yeah, I believe there might be some kind of bug there where that happens. It hasn't happened to me, but I've spoken to someone who's said the same thing. All their formatting just
Yeah,
disappeared. So
I've had that. I think it's something that Daniel is aware of, the maker of a tabular editor, and it's getting patched if it has not been already. Let's see. Here's a good one.
No, not that I have been able to do. That's what I was saying before. Is it'd be amazing if you could sort of put hex colors straight into calculation groups, or if there was like a conditional formatting expression or something for calculation items. But as far as I can tell, I did play around with it a bit because that would be awesome. But I haven't been able to figure out a way to do that. How to put conditional formatting into the calculation item. There might be a way. I haven't found it.
Here we go. There was actually somebody who was earlier asking. I was trying to search for the video, like over 100 now. Somebody was asking for the link for color, how to use symbols instead of the actual unichar function. So I'm just posting that into the chat now. So if you're curious about that, I think we have another question from Gopa. So happy to funnel that in as well. I love how many people tuned into this. I think we peaked at about 46. We're still at about 33 at the moment. And that's an hour and 22 minutes into this, which is, I think, fantastic.
I must have been a bit slow. I was about 40 minutes on my practice run, so not sure what happened.
Let's see. Oh, here we go. Actually, this is a fun one. Let's do a non-technical question.
My blog name meaning 10 fingers?
I'm going to assume it's 10 fingers, probably, because your blog itself doesn't have any unique name. It has to be the 10 fingers.
No, yeah. It's it's actually I got the name. I used to work in I've worked in the liquor industry for a long time. I had my first job in a small general store that was also a wine tasting bar and liquor store on the beach. And I used to play guitar out on the front veranda on afternoons, and some people gave me the nickname 10 Fingers for playing guitar. So it's actually a musical thing. I've got a bit of a music background. I have a degree in audio production. But it kind of stuck. I kind of started using it for all sorts of stuff. And when I was, got into Power BI, I thought it's kind of fitting. It's like I got 10 fingers to count on. So I just stuck with it.
So like you now that you've said this, next time you come on, I'm gonna ask you to like bring the guitar and you can we can come up with an idea and then you can create a ballad for how to do this thing in calculation groups.
Yeah. I might have to write a calculation group song. For sure.
Isn't there a style of rock called math rock? That's a thing, right?
I don't know, but it wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah,
I on top of all the genres out there.
I think there is. What is that, math? I 100% know what it is. I'm just trying to remember, like, what is considered math rock? Yeah, it's a style of progressive rock with roots in, I think it's probably, like, somewhat where there's an equation for how the song flows or something like that. But there you go. You could start a math rock band and just come up with a fun name for it.
It's stuff I'm interested in. I've heard some songs that are made from like Pi and stuff like that. It's very so maybe I can output something from Power BI and manipulate it into a song.
There you go. Let's see. Are there any other questions left? No, I think that's about it. So, Kane, I really want to appreciate you for being on. It's a quick just wrap up for individuals here. If you liked this, there's a description in the link to again go download the file that Kane was working on. Links to his blog are also down below. It's very helpful for this channel and myself. If you like this, hit the like button, share this if you can on social media. It helps to for both Kane and myself to just get the exposure out there. You're also welcome to check out the channel memberships. It just helps to me be able to continue to create a lot of these live streams. My stretch goal for this year is, of course, to try to get one a week. I'm so far mapped out now through the end of May. So I think I can hit this because I continually find more and more people that I want to bring on. Hopefully Kane will come back on again as well, and we can easily, I'm sure, find other stuff to talk about with calculation groups as you continue to make things. So yeah, again, everybody,
Yeah,
thanks
I've
for
got some
tuning
more
in.
stuff.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I'll 100% love to have you back on at some point in the future. The fact that we have almost 50 people that tuned into this one, I think that shows that people are very interested in calculation groups. It's one of those kind of hot topic features, certainly for Power BI right now.
Cool. Yeah, awesome. Thanks for having me on, Reed. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. And everybody, thanks again for tuning in. And I'll see you on this Friday when I will be doing another live stream. So take care.